Hello everyone and welcome to BHC Studios. Today we'll be talking about rangefinders over here versus SLRs over here, or in the modern era, DSLRs. What's the difference, why you should pick one or the other, and what are my preferences of why I would shoot with one type of camera or another, and as well as the difference between the film era and the digital era. So let's start the video now. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, KEH Camera. KEH is the original reseller of professional, collectible, and everyday gear for camera lovers everywhere since 1979. They purchase gear directly from photographers like us. We are camera nerds, and so are they, which is what I love. They renew and resell at fair prices, and they truly become part of an endless cycle of creativity, community, and opportunity. And so thank you so much, KEH, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back into talking about rangefinders or SLRs. So we pretty much know what a rangefinder or an SLR is. This is a sort of a classic rangefinder, the Leica M7, and you have that rangefinder. Well, technically this is a viewfinder window, and this is the rangefinder window that helps you focus with a traditional rangefinder. And over here we have a traditional film SLR, and it kind of has a certain aesthetic, right? So even if you didn't know anything about photography, if you tell someone this is a rangefinder and this is an SLR, you could sort of aesthetically tell. You got that kind of a flat top on the rangefinder and as well as an SLR. Now, me personally, I love the look of a rangefinder, but that's very subjective. In and out of a camera bag, rangefinders do kind of slip in and out better, and they are thinner because of the complexities of having an SLR or DSLR with the mirror. So let's talk a little bit about that technology first. And to help us, we will be using this book called Analog Photography. I got this from Camera Film Photo, so thank you so much, Michelle, for sending this out to me. I think they're currently sold out, but you can go and see if they still have stock. And in here, they have a little chart here. And so, very simple chart. You can see how simple a rangefinder camera system works. You got your lens, that's the lens mount there, and that's the film plane, or I guess the sensor plane. And pretty much the image comes in and bada bing, right onto the film or sensor plane, but you're not viewing the image through the actual film plane, right? You're viewing it through a viewfinder that is not lined up to the actual, what you're actually capturing. Versus an SLR or DSLR, you have your lens here. Now there is a mirror that flips up and down. So the SLR stands for single lens reflex. Reflex is the action of this mirror moving up and out of the way. So when you are looking, the image goes up here, up through the pentaprism, and then you're looking through the viewfinder. So this actually helps to, images are actually upside down when it goes through a lens. And so this corrects for that upside downness. And so you are looking through here, and when you take a picture, this mirror moves up, and then it exposes either the film plane or the sensor. So that's the technical difference between a rangefinder and a SLR. So for example here, this is an autofocus SLR, the 9XI from Minolta. And you can see here, let's just move this. You can see the mirror in there. By turning the camera on, you see the mirror. Now it flips up, right? See that? Flips up, flips down. As we saw in that diagram, you're looking up, it goes up into the pentaprism, which is why you have this hump, and you're actually looking through this viewfinder. And so just to show you here, so open up the back. So this is where the film goes through. And if we press the shutter button, there you go. Now you actually get to see through here, but you can't see through the viewfinder anymore, right? Because the mirror is blocking it. Here's my finger here. So we let go of the shutter button because I'm in bulb mode. You can sort of see here my hand through the viewfinder window. All right, so that's how it works. Another example here, we can look at a rangefinder, and I remove the lens here, and there is no mirror, right? So what you are is looking through here, through the viewfinder, but it doesn't line up with the lens. So you're not actually seeing what you're gonna get. And you focus through this rangefinder window here, and there is it's inside here, it's superimposed, and two images come together, which helps you focus. But you're not actually seeing what you're getting. You're not getting depth of field. You're not getting, if you have a telephoto lens, you're not actually kind of magnified in, but you just see these little windows inside. And let's just open up the back here. A little bit more complicated on a Leica M body, but here we go. You open up the back here, and you see the cloth shutter. There you go. That little dot there is for metering. And there you go. You're looking through here, but you're actually always looking through here. So the advantage of a rangefinder is that even when the shutter is being pressed, you are still able to keep an eye on your subject. So you can see you have a variety of SLRs, DSLRs, as well as rangefinders. This is a Sony, but also it uses the Minolta A mount DSLR here, and you can see how kind of chunkified this is. And compared to a sort of a modern digital rangefinder, technically this is not a true rangefinder, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but you can see the difference because again, this has that mirror, which creates that larger flange back, right? And the larger the flange back, the thicker the body is. And so you can clearly see the advantages of mirrorless cameras today. And so let's talk a little bit about flange back. This Minolta A mount flange back distance is 44.5 millimeters, and 44 is about right. Canon EF mount is 44. The Pentax K mount is 45.46. The Nikon F mount is 46.5. Or if you look at, for instance, something kind of in the middle, the Leica M mount flange back distance is 27.8. It's almost 20 millimeters or 2 centimeters less of a flange back distance, which helps to keep the profile thin on rangefinders like this. But once you get to digital mirrorless cameras, which have the advantage of a rangefinder because there is no need for that mirror, the Fujifilm X mount is 17.7. So it's 10 millimeters narrower even than the Leica M mount. And amongst the mainstream mirrorless cameras, the Nikon Z mount is 16 millimeters. And the closer you have the lens to the sensor, in general, the better image quality you get. And that's why oftentimes back in the film era, they would say between rangefinders and SLRs, you could make sharper, brighter lenses on rangefinders versus SLRs because that flange back distance was closer. Now, back in the film days, one of the advantages that people talked about using a rangefinder was, first of all, because you're not looking through the lens, and because when you're actually taking the picture, your viewfinder isn't blacked out, that you can constantly keep an eye on your subject through this rangefinder. So if you're taking a portrait of someone and they blink, with a rangefinder, you can actually see them blink, right? Where on a SLR, there's a blackout. And some people would say the beauty of photography is seeing the moment of exposure, seeing that actual image being captured. And with SLRs and DSLRs, you actually do miss that moment. There are some exceptions. There are cameras with fixed pellicle mirrors that still allowed you to continually see your image, but in general, that's kind of the advantage of the rangefinder. And as well with the rangefinder for street photography, people liked it because not only was it more compact, if you are right eye dominant, which I am not, I am left eye dominant, you keep your right eye on here and then your left eye is out here, and you can continually, you have a wider peripheral where if you are looking through an SLR and no matter what, if you're left or right eye dominant, you could only see what you can see through the lens. Where on a rangefinder, not only can you free up your left eye, but within the viewfinder window, depending on the magnification of your rangefinder, you can still see outside the frame line. So if someone's walking into your frame, you can see them walking in, and once they're exactly where you want them to be, click and you take your photo. So that's one of the advantages of the rangefinder cameras. And I would say that typically between 28 millimeters and 50 millimeters is the sweet spot for rangefinders. If you go super wide, you need to put on a external optical viewfinder. So you use that to frame and then still use the rangefinder system to focus. And if you go to telephoto, the viewfinder here is just way too small. So that's kind of the weakness of a rangefinder, is typically between 28 and 50. And if that's typically what you shoot, either in film or in digital, then I think a rangefinder is great. Now, the advantage of SLRs and DSLRs is, of course, you could put huge lenses, 300 millimeter, 400 millimeter, 600 millimeter, and you're able to see through the lens. You get to see what you're actually going to get. And with SLRs, because you're looking through the lens, you can stop the lens down, and then often these cameras will have a stop down feature, so you can actually see the aperture here. So you can see your true depth of field, something that you cannot see on a traditional rangefinder camera. So that's another advantage of having SLRs. Now, the disadvantage, other than the ones that we've already talked about, typically DSLRs are louder because of that mirror, right? But this is still kind of a silky smooth sounding. And let's just see the... Clearly it's more quiet because that mirror isn't flipping up and down. Now there were some odd cameras, like for instance this camera here, it says Minolta 110 zoom SLR, and it is a single lens reflex. You are looking through here, there is a reflex mirror in here, and you are looking through this lens, but it's compact. Why? Because it uses 110 film. But again, you can see the depth here because this is officially an SLR. And this camera here, the Olympus Pen, it looks like a rangefinder because of the aesthetics, but actually this is a interchangeable lens SLR because the mirror is sideways. And this is actually a half frame, which means, if you can see here, the image, instead of shooting this way 35 minutes, it shoots this way. So out of a 36 roll, you can get 72 to 74 frames in this. But this is actually a SLR and not a rangefinder. And then we have the point and shoot cameras from the back in the old film days. And although it looks like a rangefinder, technically it's not, because you can focus by scale using the scale system here on the Nikon 35 Ti. But a camera like this, it is autofocus. So I would say it's kind of a hybrid rangefinder in that you are looking through a rangefinder type window. You are focusing by scale, but you still get the advantage of a rangefinder, meaning it's still reasonably thin and you are able to see the moment of exposure. There is no blackout. So this is not technically a rangefinder, but you get the advantages of a rangefinder camera. And this is a really neat camera, the Olympus XA. This is the version 1, so you actually have aperture control here. So you can see the aperture opening and closing here. And this is a true rangefinder. So you actually manually focus down here and you can see the rangefinder window and then your viewfinder window right over here. And because that distance is so close, it is kind of hard to focus. The more distance you have between the viewfinder window and the rangefinder window, the more accurate focusing you can have. And so you can look at something like a Leica M, the distance here is a decent distance apart, so you can sort of, the focusing is kind of a triangulated focus, and so you can get more accurate. But you look at an XA, look how tight that is. And so you could see how small you can make rangefinder cameras versus an SLR camera is quite a bit thicker and larger. Mind you, this does also have a zoom lens. So now we're in the digital era. A camera like this, Fujifilm X100, it looks like a rangefinder, and technically it is not, because there is no rangefinder window on this side, right? Cleverly, they use the tally light and the focus light here to look like a rangefinder window, but it is not. But I would say this is a modern interpretation of rangefinder because, again, you still get the advantages. There is no reflex mirror, so you can keep it reasonably thin. You do get to see the actual exposure, and because of the hybrid viewfinder model of Fujifilm, you can go from EVF to an OVF with the Fujifilm, which is very unique. But in the most strictest sense, this is not a rangefinder, but again, you do get the advantages of a rangefinder. And let's look at another camera here. This is the Fujifilm X-H1. Looks like a DSLR or an SLR because it has that hump here, but this is actually a mirrorless camera. And of course, and you can see here, this is a mirrorless camera, and this is a mirrorless camera. But this has the aesthetics of a rangefinder, while this has an aesthetics of a SLR or DSLR. And so why would there be an aesthetic difference? Is there an actual functional difference? Well, with Fujifilm there is, because you do have that optical viewfinder, but in terms of thickness, they can make these mirrorless cameras as thin or as thick as you want, because the flange back distance is the same on these two cameras, but they do serve sort of slightly different functions. Aesthetically, you have this clean top here, so it's easy to get in and out of your bag, and it is thin. Where this camera here, you have these chunkified dials on the top, and you have this large EVF, which makes it easy to look through, especially if you do wear glasses, but you don't have an optical viewfinder mode. So the advantage of having something like this, a lot of it is ergonomics with this big grip and having this large EVF. But when you're shooting, you can shoot very similarly between something like an X Pro 3 or an X-H1 or X-T4. So when you're choosing between SLRs or rangefinders, back in the film days, it made a big difference. When you shot with the film rangefinder, you do have limited lens choices, but they're lighter, more compact, quieter to shoot, and you get to see the moment of exposure, and you have more peripheral view versus having an SLR. You have larger range of lenses. You can actually see your depth of field. It is bigger, it is chunkier, but you can do more with cameras like this. Often sports wildlife photographers did shoot with SLRs, and a lot of street photographers, documentary photographers that didn't need telephoto lenses and ultra wide lenses often went with rangefinders. When you get into the digital realm, it makes less of a difference because you can have both of these in EVF mode. You can shoot with the LCD with both of these cameras, and you got crazy peripheral, right? You got both eyes that you can look left and right. So that's kind of the advantage of actually shooting with the rear LCD. And so when it comes to digital, I think a lot of it comes down to kind of ergonomics as well as aesthetics. A lot of people just love the look of the X Pro 3 or kind of this rangefinder type camera. Well, if you're shooting sports, wildlife, and you have big lenses, you kind of want a camera with a large grip. Maybe you want these big dials here. And with an XH1, you do have IBIS. So let me know down below, which type of cameras do you prefer to shoot with rangefinder cameras or rangefinder styled cameras, or with SLRs or SLR styled cameras, or if you're actually still shooting with DSLRs, and why you shoot with those type of cameras. So again, I'd like to thank KEH for sponsoring this video. They are the original camera re-commerce company serving the photographic community since 1979 and has become the largest curated market for field-tested, expert-graded photo and video equipment in the industry, with up to 60,000 items in stock, up to 40% below retail, 100% KEH approved, appraised, graded, renewed, and resold. Now you can phone and schedule a video chat for a more accurate quote on your gear if you are wanting to sell. And they do have a 21-day return or exchange policy for anything that you do buy, with 180-day warranty. KEH camera graded by experts, renewed with care, one of a kind, sustainable, and exchangeable. So thank you so much, KEH. As well, I have discount codes. So if you are selling or if you're buying, you can get 5% off, or you get 5% extra. So check out the discount codes that I have below with the links. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions and what other types of videos you want to see, especially when it comes to gear. And as you can see, a camera like this is a rangefinder. Check out this camera. Isn't that so cool? Polaroid land camera. And this is how you focus using this here. You can see the bellows moves in and out just a little bit like that. And this is the shutter cock right here. So now the film is ready to rock and roll. Thanks for watching and happy shooting.